ప్రేమ స్వరూపులారా, విద్యార్థులారా, who am I.
Greetings, Science Scoopers. You've tuned in to your weekly booster. Your mission, should you choose to accept, is to scoop deep into your heart and reconnect. Welcome to Inside Scoop, a podcast that brings you practical servings of Swami's sweetest teachings. Guys, today's topic couldn't be more timely, and I am thrilled to be discussing it with Brother Mitran Balakrishnan, who is the Selangor State Education Coordinator and the former National Teen Youth Coordinator of Malaysia. Hi, Anna.
Hi, Nira.
Dear listeners, unlike our last two episodes, today's conversation is going to be a little bit more intense. I can see Mitran and Anna sweating a little bit already. So, Anna, what's the first thing that comes to mind when I say leaders?
Well, I think you think of the two extremes. Either the inspiring, the kind of leader that that you feel like you want to make a difference after, being affected by them. Or it's the other extreme where you think of those, monsters, those scary ones that you just don't want to engage with.
And which category do you fall into?
Well, it's a tough one. I would like to think of a better one, but I can see it. I can see why I'm sweating. As they say, after many years of teaching SSC and your students come back, I guess karma has its way of coming back. Look forward to this.
I'll go easy on you, Anna.
Thank you.
Let me start by painting you a couple of scenarios, okay? So scenario A, you go for bhajans, which conclude with the center spiritual coordinator sharing Swami's message on how we shouldn't talk ill of others in their absence and see Swami in everyone. At dinner after bhajans, the same person is seen spreading rumors, criticizing another office bearer in the center. Scenario B, organizations in Prashanti want to bring all three limbs of the Sai organization, namely the Sri Sathya Sai Central Trust, the Sri Sathya Sai Seva Organization, and the SSIO under one umbrella for a more unified governance. But they appear to be doing so in a manner that is causing greater division. So I'm going to jump right into the heart of the issue, Anna. Swami's goal was for the organization to spread the message of unity, love, and service, right? But how do we set an example for the rest of the world and convince them of Swami's teachings when the organization in itself is struggling to embody those values?
So just to get started, I think, leadership it's an interesting thing. Leadership, whether in a professional organization or even a non-profit, does have its challenges. So it's not an easy role, and my much respect to all leaders out there for taking on challenges such as this. But taking on to the question on the organization itself, firstly, just to qualify things, I'm sure we have heard this before, and just to be clear, Swami does not need the organization, but it's necessary structure made available for our engagement and our participation. Also, of course, for our spiritual growth and evolution, as you may call it. If it happens, it's Swami's will. It's Swami's will for it to happen. However, what's important though is how we receive it, how we consume, whether somebody gossiping at dinner, how do we digest that information, how do you react to it, and then responding to it. That's process, I think, is very important, and an opportunity for it to be a learning opportunity.
Right.
So before we even worry about being an exemplary organization to the world, I think it's important for us to focus on being exemplary human beings, meaning doing our very best to live up to the ideals that Swami has prescribed, if I may say so.
Right.
I know we feel of all places are expected to get peace here, but here also I'm getting the same politics or drama, as you may call it, or the types of individuals I already see at school or at work or at home.
Right.
So why here too?
Yeah.
So I guess the question to ponder then is the anxiety and the uneasiness triggered from external factors? Is it from these leaders? or is it internal factors which translate this situation as unpleasant or unkind, as we say?
Okay, so I get your point that you're saying a lot of it is our perception of how we view the situation, and we should pause and evaluate our own issues and why we're being triggered. Are we being oversensitive, etc.? But are there some situations where it's quite clear that there's something wrong and there's no real argument? And in those situations, how do we deal with this frustration that the leaders are not exemplifying Swami's values?
Okay. So when we say, Sai values, are these perceptions of behaviors which, we don't resonate? Because, we all come with our own value systems and belief systems.
Right.
So is it these behaviors, are they perceptions that they don't resonate with us? Or is this really the truth? Meaning that they really don't conduct themselves in line with, how a Sai sister or brother should lead. So that's a question we should ask, regardless what the answer is.
Right.
It's not a case of us accepting or condoning such reactions or behavior. I'm not saying we should accept such behaviors,
Right.
but it's important that, to understand that such behavior may stem from a personal challenge or battle that this leader is facing.
Right.
So what I'm trying to do here is first try and empathize with what this leader is doing.
Right.
Because before we can deal with our emotions, is first try and empathize. Maybe there's some challenge that this leader is going through.
Right.
Leaders are not perfect. They also have their own challenges and they have their own challenges. Then is to go on to understand where they may be coming from. It's really important for us to try and connect to that. I remember one situation where we were dealing with a particular class where they were having a lot of challenges. The classes the students were not enjoying, and a leader from that class, the teacher came and asked for help. Now, what we did was to have a one-to-one honest, one-to-one with the students.
Right.
The teachers were worried, what will happen out of this? Because, the students could speak bad about them. Even the students were very careful about saying it. But when we had this one-to-one situation and we were able to, air out, their feelings and their opinions, then, it helped, address such things. So sometimes there are blind spots that leaders are missing. So let's not be afraid to address it. I know not everyone's open to it, but one thing is being empathetic towards his leaders. The next thing is being brave enough to confront the situation. I think those are important things to do.
We're all just travelers on a journey at the end of the day. And sometimes I think the world is also watching how we respond to these situations, right? So yes, the triggers might be occurring, right? These scenarios come up, but we also need to ask ourselves, is at least our response to the trigger aligned with Swami's teachings? Because at the end of the day, it works both ways, right? So then I think the real issue is our expectations. We expect leaders to be our role models and we idolize them. So when they don't live up to that, we are disappointed. Do you think that's a fair assessment?
I agree. And we must understand that leaders, just like we covered earlier, that leaders have their own battles. And also it's a journey, right? Like you said, a leader today may over time, they may change their styles of leadership, meaning they could be improving for the better. And so we start seeing that, hey, there's some positive change. There's something that I can learn from this leader. But similarly, it may work the other way around. Somebody who we totally looked up to, somebody who we really respected and we tied in our entire experience of Sai to, suddenly they may disappoint us.
Right.
They may not disappoint the entire organization, but they may disappoint us with their reaction or their words or their choice of. And that's where we need to be careful that we need to always connect to Swami and not the leaders. The leaders are means or experiences in that. And certainly it's important. But yes, we need to be cautious about tying our definitions of leadership to particular individuals itself.
Right. Okay. So even if we decide to reflect and temper our expectations, right? Now let's talk about how we can respond to these triggers. Okay. So Swami has said that we should keep away from bad company. So does this mean that we should disengage from the organization or a center when our perception, in our minds, it feels like it's not conducive to our growth?
I've had this, I've personally gone through this myself in that same question, which is, I come here for peace, and in this exact same place, I experience this. I remember having this thought of, is this even worth it to be in an organization, in this organization?
Right.
I was a youth leader at some point, and during one of the parting, when you're handing over your role, I remember giving a speech, and thanking all the other youths who worked with me and helped me, and I said, if there's one thing that I'm thankful for is when the youth came together, we worked from the back, and we certainly were anchor for the organization.
Right.
And a senior leader took on the mic after that and said, yeah, very good, but I hope in future the youth leaders don't work from the back, you'll also work in front, make yourself useful and visible.
Wow.
And for me, that really struck me very much, because in my feeling, I totally gave my heart, I gave my soul, and I really worked with a very strong group of youths who really were giving their heart and soul to the center.
Right.
So at that point I was like, is this even worth it? It wasn't just anyone, but it was a leader within the organization. It wasn't fair. How could they say that?
Yeah.
And I had that feeling that you said. But we go through the same thing at home. We have reactions at home as well. Our family can also hurt us in different ways, but we don't walk away as easily. I mean, I'm sure there are people who walk away from their families, but I think if we take down that path, we're walking away from an opportunity again to learn from a learning opportunity.
Right.
I think for me, what was important is that I needed to find the peace in the situation.
Right.
That was the first thing I needed to find as the first step. To reflect, did I really not give my best? Was there really something a shortfall? And you shouldn't, sometimes I feel we shouldn't talk to someone as much about this, and it needs to be self-reflective. Otherwise we get so much into the justifying and trying to qualify, and then it becomes very emotional.
Right.
Now, if all of this does not work, and if you've connected within, and you have done your typical ritual of checking with Swami, whatever that is, and your conscience is clear, then take the steps that are necessary for you. But my first take would not be stepping away, because I think the organization itself has a lot to offer us. Sometimes those experiences may not be kind to us, but there is something to teach us.
Yeah.
It means that there is still something within us. If we're getting hurt, there is still an opportunity, there is still something for us to consider. But I can't deny that sometimes walking away is what it takes. Sometimes there are certainly some people who they have evolved better when they've walked away. Maybe that walking away is taking a break, reflecting, and coming back. They couldn't reflect within them. Sometimes that walking away is that they needed to go somewhere else, and maybe there was a higher purpose for them to give, to contribute, and for them to benefit. So I can't give a clear yes or no answer. It's really depending on each one's journey.
When you pray to Swami for patience and equanimity, he isn't going to give you a spoonful of equanimity and a bowl full of patience. He's going to give you opportunities to grow those qualities, right? So that resonates with what you were saying.
Yeah, so, and I think to add on to that, it's a safe playground. Maybe I can say that, but I think it's a safe playground for us to be tested, to be challenged, and for us to come out in whatever that's necessary for our journey.
When I look back at my journey in the SAI organization, that began when I was just this SSC kid, and I see how much I've changed and the mistakes I've made and the people I may have unknowingly hurt along the way. But when I look at my friend circle now, they're mostly SAI friends, not so much my colleagues or uni mates. And I think that's because my SAI friends understand me at a deeper level and have tolerated my shortcomings and accepted me as my personality evolved, and they grew with me. So it's a brilliant point that you've raised, that it's such a safe place to become, the best version of yourself.
Yeah.
And as you're speaking, I was reminded by something else Swami said. He once told his students that Saint Tukaram, Saint Kabir, and even Einstein were surrounded by negative and rude people. But Swami said that they never allowed their senses to impede their spiritual progress and equanimity. Instead, they were so grateful for the challenges because it compelled them to constantly remember God.
Yeah, and we got to also recognize that, as they say, to know that this is part of his leelas, it is part of what he feels is necessary for transformation, and not to be caught up by the scenes of the drama that's coming out, but to take a step back from that and try and understand what is the whole learning from here.
If we've decided, I want to use this as an opportunity for my growth, right? There's one school of thought that says, okay, just focus on the work. The work is so important. Do the seva and tune out the noise. Those are not important. But aren't the means of doing Swami's work just as important as the end? So it's not just about doing Swami's work, it's also about how we do it, right? So if we don't accept the way certain work is being done, by just staying and doing the work, are we condoning that?
Yeah. So it's a tough question. I think it's something that it's a very important question. It's a tough question, but it's something that I think we're all experiencing it at some extent right now.
Right.
And yes, I think firstly, before to appreciate both sides or all parts, as I may say, to any situation, is I think as a general saying, I think all the different individuals are coming from a point of a good heart. I think the intent is appropriate. Unity is certainly the keyword that's being used, and I think the intent is right. But of course, the means of how it's happening, and the back and forth, and the time that it's taken is causing some level of disunity, as much as it may not be intended. But I think it goes down to where do you truly connect to this getting it depends on our role. Sometimes at the highest level of leadership, you do need to go through those necessary battles. You do need to go through the process of explaining, addressing questions, and it can be draining. It can be very draining because you're trying to deal with various different characters, different kinds of questions, which are, and sometimes you don't even have all the answers. Right. And as a leader, you need to still be up there.
Yeah.
You still need to be able to deal with it. Yes, there is a level of are we condoning this or are we condoning that? But I think what's important is that we need to be clear in our communication. We need to be unbiased, and if we are saying something, there needs to be a unity in what we are saying. The unity in thought, word, and deed.
But Anna, I apologize for harping on the condoning aspect of the issue, because I remember Swami once explained to his students that when Draupadi was disrobed in the Mahabharata by the Kauravas, it wasn't just the Kauravas who had sinned, Swami says. He said those who watched or didn't object were also the sinners. And I quote Swami directly, he says, "You are seeing, why don't you obstruct? If you think, why should I bother, then you are also a sinner." And he ends the session by saying that if anyone commits a wrongdoing, we should teach them, and that we should develop an attitude of brotherhood with one another and rectify each other's defects. And so he says it is for this reason that he set up all his institutions. So given that Swami has said this, how can I focus on the work if that also means I might be condoning views and behaviors that I disagree with?
Yeah, so yes, I think we need to say our piece.
Right.
Without doubt, I think we need to say our piece.
Right.
But before saying your piece, I think we need to consider enough information. I think in any situation, you need to consider the information that's there, that's necessary. But after a certain extent of doing that, I think we need to then go back and connect to Swami on this. And from what I'm observing, I think different people are connecting in a different way. Maybe it's just that, it's not the first time we're seeing such a split. We've seen it in the past. And whether this is the last, I'm not sure. At the end of the day, we need to understand that, if it is happening under Swami's organization, if it's all happening, we need to also digest the fact that, this is also Swami's Leelas. This is also Swami's will. So yes, we need to say our part. We shouldn't keep quiet. We need to voice out whatever that's necessary. But we also need to catch ourselves. Are we continuing to, dwelling on the same matter again and again and again, that it is not just consuming our energy, but it's also consuming the energy of people who need a break. Say your piece, do what's necessary, and then let it go.
Right.
I think the let it go is the part that that we find it very hard.
Right.
And let it go also needs to happen with leaders at any point.
Right.
Sometimes we were very relevant, we were very important, but if we really want, and this very much is a question, why are young people not coming up to leadership? And sometimes it's because we don't let go.
Right.
Because we are holding on so much and we're still continuing to find for that relevance and that, my ideas or my interpretation is the most important, then we lose visibility of the bigger picture.
Right.
So without doubt, I agree. We need to communicate. We need to say what is necessary.
Right.
But then we need to stop dwelling and we need to let go.
Right.
And that's when we really will see Swami taking over.
Understood. I'm really glad that you brought up the point of, saying our piece and voicing our concerns. But can you give us some examples of how you did that, how you balanced being respectful to our elders and now leaders who are usually, older to us, and also communicating what needs to be said?
I think taking on when I was taking on the role of the national teen youth role, it was going through a phase where we were introducing new things, where there was new content, there was new styles of doing things.
Right.
We were giving content, we were coming up with content at that point of time. Prior to that, there was a mix of giving content, but we moved into giving structured content. And the challenge that some of the teachers faced was, how do I take this content and pass it on to the students? Because the traditional way of how I used to do things was a challenge.
Right.
Because it was very easy to do this, but now you come up with this kind of new content and I don't know how to take it forward.
Right.
And that was a challenge, because these were gurus who have been serving for so many years, and being able to have that conversation with them to say, you need to understand your terrain, and then they say, but I don't understand what you're talking about.
Right.
How do you take this? How do you find this relevance? It's a journey. What I realized, the change did happen. We needed to try different ways of doing things. We needed to go on the ground. There's a lot of coaching that needs to happen. There's a lot of hand-holding that needs to happen.
Right.
And at some point, it does happen. But you need to believe.
Right.
I've myself been shot back. I've been told, you don't understand. You all understand it on a national level, but you don't understand how it works on a state level, or you don't understand how it happens on a center level. It's a common question that, it's a common statement that comes out.
Right.
But I think those road shows, those visits, those working together, those, okay, let's try this one lesson plan. Now, how would you do it? This is how I would do it.
Right.
And what do you think about it? And then you handhold them, and they realize that you're not here to change them.
Right.
You're not here to tell them, you're not relevant. But I want to see, if you cannot do this, never mind, you have so much of experience. But what if I can find someone creative to sit with you?
Yeah.
And it's interesting today, during the AGM, Center AGM, there's this new role which is called a youth development.
Right.
And it's a new role that has been brought into the organization, where the youth development is someone who sits to bridge the leadership together with the youths. And I think that is a very, very important role.
That's a step in the right direction. Like, we're moving forward, right? The fact that we've identified,
That's right. And it bridges the good intent of the leaders to make sure that we have youth, but also being able to understand what are the motivations of these youth who want to come up.
Right.
And I think, that's necessary. This mentor-mentee that we have heard, walking through the journey, it takes effort. It takes effort, but I think that's what will really be the difference that's necessary.
Awesome example, Anne. I can't thank you enough for braving this uncharted territory with a whole lot of candor and balance as well. So, dear listeners, it's now time for your weekly dose of prasadam pills that you can pop whenever you struggle with challenges in the organization. 1. Swami has said that those who have wronged will not be destroyed. Instead, they will be reformed and educated in his own time and way. 2. This organization and its members are just like any other organization. The only difference being that its objective is for each of us to realize our divinity. So it's our responsibility to ensure our response to these situations exemplifies Swami's values of empathy, love, and equanimity. 3. Place our expectations on Swami, who is the ultimate role model. Everyone else are equal travelers, bringing us closer to him. 4. When deciding if the environment is no longer conducive to our growth, we can ask if this situation is bringing me closer or further from Sai. Is my seva still pure, or do I need a break as it is tainted with ill feelings? 5. Swami warns us not to condone adharma. We must advocate for what is right, but then surrender the outcome to him. Next on Inside Scoop, we discuss if we have any control over life and why surrendering is so difficult. Until next Friday, happy scooping!